And now, marine weather around Alaska. I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska marine weather outlook for the end of this week, Thursday and Friday. We start out, though, with this Wednesday afternoon sea ice, and it's extensive throughout the north. Bitter cold temperatures. The stronger winds have opened some polynyas to the north and northeast there of Kaktovik toward the Canadian Arctic coast. And as we drop further south, the ice has really reformed along the southwest coast, especially in through Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays. We're also seeing ice development now down into the middle portion of Cook Inlet. And we are expecting here through the end of the week a stronger northeast to northerly flow of air to develop here off the southwest mainland and especially down along the Aleutian chain. This will result in some heavy to even extreme freezing spray developing where you do have open water south of the ice edge. But some of the coldest temperatures of the winter are yet on the way. So very cold air mass will begin sinking southward the end of this week, overspreading the southwest interior this weekend, and even lingering through next week into the following weekend to start out the beginning of February. So be prepared for a prolonged stretch of cold winter weather that'll feature at times some very cold wind chills as well. So looking at the weather map here as we go through this Wednesday night into early Thursday morning, weak low pressure just off the Kenai as well as southwest of the Panhandle. Still some areas of light rain snow going on here in through the Panhandle overnight and into the day on Thursday. And we have this ridge of high pressure that extends from eastern Russia across the central northern interior. That feature will hold here. In fact, re-intensify as we go into the following week and further ahead. But here we have that ridge still in place Thursday afternoon. Not much going on, a couple of weak lows in the Gulf. This one will continue to sit just off of the Panhandle coastline in Haida Gwaii, and still some lingering areas of light snow and rain. The next, though, real significant low to start to come out of the Pacific will be down here in the North Pacific Friday afternoon with this front arcing ahead of it. Could really draw this portion of it as a warm front. And we are going to have a push of milder, moist air coming into the Gulf beginning Friday and especially over the weekend and continuing at least until the early middle part of next week. This is going to cause the freezing levels to rise along areas of the Panhandle and bring in warmer temperatures with the potential for heavier rainfall, 2 to 4 inches of rain falling on top of areas like the Icy Corridor and Juneau that received all that heavy snowfall here the past 7 to 10 days. So be aware of that. Also, the winds really start to increase out of the northeast here along the southwest coast, along the Alaska Peninsula into the Aleutians on Friday. So marine forecast, inner channels, north winds 10 knots, 2-foot waves, Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, southeast winds 15 knots, waves 4 or 5 feet there at Metlakatla. More of a mixed bag of winds 5-10 knots off the Gulf Coast, waves generally running 7-8 feet, maybe as high as 10 feet here south of Sitka, west of Craig. For Friday, with that front approaching and we develop a stronger, milder southeasterly flow, we expect southeast winds 20-30 knots, gusts 35-40 knots there, Stevens Passage down through Dixon Entrance. Also look for southeast winds 25 to 30 knots here, Sitka southward. Turning more easterly, Gustavus there, Yakutat. Northerly 20 knots there within Lynn Canal with 4-foot waves. For the northwestern Gulf on Thursday, winds will be generally out of the northeast 15-20 knots within Prince William Sound, 2-foot waves. Winds through Middle Cook Inlet north and then northwest pulling out there at the entrance at 25 knots with 6 to 7-foot waves. And for Friday, we expect winds continue northeasterly 15 knots within Prince William Sound, 3-foot waves. 20-knot northeast winds with waves 10-12 feet off the Kenai coast. And then north winds 25 to 30 knots through lower Cook Inlet with waves of 6 to 8 feet. For the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, winds will be northeasterly 20 to 25 knots around Kodiak Island. And those northeast winds of 20 to 25 knots on the Bering side, more northerly 15 to 20 knots on the North Pacific side. And by the time we get into Friday, we'll see those winds strengthening. North winds around 30 knots, areas around Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, east of Chicknick. And then look for north winds of 35 knots as you tail out the peninsula at Cold Bay and False Pass. Waves could build in excess of 10 to 14 feet there in the Bering side there north of Cold Bay. Across the Aleutian chain on Thursday, winds generally in the 25 to 30 knot range out of the northeast. But by the time we get into Friday, look at this, 40 knot gales common out of the northeast. This is going to cause areas of heavy freezing spray in the lower Bering, as well as anywhere around the Aleutian chain, so be wary of that, and also building seas. We're looking at waves on the north side there, in the Bering side, creeping upward around 20-22 feet. For the southwest coast, north winds 20 knots out of Kuskokwim, Bristol Bay, 30 knot northeast winds, St. Paul to Pribilof Islands. North winds Norton Sound 20 knots. And then for Friday, those winds will be picking up along the southwest coast. North winds out of Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays to 30 knots, but we do have that ice in place. 35 knot gales northeasterly there at St. Paul with waves of 13 feet. Areas south of the Bering Strait on Thursday, look for northeast winds 10 knots. Winds turn back westerly 10 to 15 knots. West of Norton Sound and along the northwest coast, but pick up again along the central Arctic coast from Utqiagvik, especially Prudhoe Bay to Kaktovik, 30 to 40 knot westerly winds. Continue to be some areas of blowing snow here along the ice. And then for Friday, we expect winds along the Arctic coast to be southwest 20 to 25 knots. Ice in place, and then coming down through the lower Chukchi, look for west to northwest winds 15 to 20 knots. And passing through the Bering Strait, we anticipate on the west side of the Seward Peninsula, Wales to Port Clarence, and out toward the north side of St. Lawrence Island, north winds to 20 knots.